And then also just try to keep yourselves on mute. Try to kind of keep the clatter down. Sorry if there's some clatter on my end. We will allow questions. Just make sure you're putting them in the chat box. Just depending on time, each speaker has a lot of time. We'll either address them right then and there, or at the end. We'll try to get to everyone's questions. If they're kind of in depth, I'm sure our speakers will get back to you once they've come up with an answer. And then as always, we're always trying to provide educational opportunities to our urban communities. So if you have any topics, ideas, any struggles you're having that you would like some more information about, don't hesitate to reach out to our office or to me. We're always looking for future urban chat ideas. But today we have 3 speakers, 3 guests. We have Michelle Flanagan, who's a stormwater coordinator in Ohio's EPA Division of Surface Water. And then we have Jonathan Walters. He's a compliance manager with Earthworks Environmental. And then we have Greg Smith, who's a developer with Ober Companies. And then last, I just wanted to wish everyone a happy Earth Day, get my little cheesiness on, show Woodsy the owl, lend a hand, care for the land. These SWP plans and compliance really helps, take care of our land. So it's just kind of you guys giving your hand to the land. So thanks for whenever you are in compliance, and then, always working towards compliance and trying to protect our natural resources. So with that, I will go ahead and introduce our next speaker. I've got to pull up her presentation. We have Michelle Flanagan. She has about 18 years of regulatory work experience, with the past 5 years as a stormwater coordinator in Ohio EPA's Division of Surface Water. Michelle holds a Master's of Science degree in Environmental Safety and Health Management. Michelle's position covers the industrial, construction, and municipal areas of the stormwater program. So with that, I gotta turn the volume up on my computer. She prepared a nice video for us, and she is here along with Jason Fife and some other co-workers and Ohio EPA personnel to answer questions. So I'm gonna play this video, and hopefully you guys can all hear and see it.
Today's presentation is primarily tailored towards a residential subdivision. First, let's discuss why is there a national pollutant discharge elimination system construction general permit for stormwater. Stormwater runoff from construction sites often contains pollutants in quantities that could adversely affect water quality. As such, an NPDES general permit spells out criteria for discharging stormwater from construction sites both during and after the construction process. Next, we will discuss the impacts during construction. When uncontrolled, runoff can lead to erosion of sediment. Sediment is a leading cause of impairment and adds nutrients to streams. In addition, channels lose capacity and habitat due to deposition of construction site sediment. Now that we have discussed why you need construction stormwater general permit coverage, as well as potential impacts, let's see what activities need coverage under the construction stormwater general permit. Construction activities means clearing, grading, excavating, grubbing, and or filling. It does not necessarily mean that building activities are occurring at that time. This would apply for sites that disturb 1 or more acres or are part of a larger common plan of development. Now let's go over how and when construction stormwater permit coverage is obtained. You will need to submit a notice of intent electronically via Ohio EPA's Electronic Business Center. You will need to certify that you have a compliant stormwater pollution prevention plan. As far as the timing, the stormwater pollution prevention plan must be fully developed or all areas of disturbance prior to the NOI submittal. The NOI form must be submitted at least 21 days prior to construction, and for lot NOI applications must be submitted at least 7 days prior to the transfer of ownership. As lots are sold, their portion of the SWP and responsibility must be communicated and passed on to the next operator. Now that we've covered the how and when to obtain construction stormwater permit coverage, let's go over who gets coverage and their associated responsibilities. Operators must submit the NOI to obtain coverage. An operator means any party associated with the construction project that meets either of the following two criteria. The party has day-to-day operational control of all activities at a project which are necessary to ensure compliance with the SWP for the site and all permit conditions, including the ability to authorize modifications to the SWP, construction plans, and site specification to ensure compliance with the general permit. Or a property owner meets the definition of operator should the party which has day-to-day operational control require additional authorization from the owner for modifications to the SWP, construction plans, and or site specification to ensure compliance with the permit. If there are multiple operators at a site, each one would obtain coverage as a co-permittee. Now let's go over the responsibilities. In this case, it is presented as a residential development. The developer would be responsible for maintaining all erosion and sediment control measures, except areas that have been transferred to lot operators. Disturbed areas must be temporarily stabilized at least 7 days prior to the transfer of permit coverage for the individual lots. The developer would also be responsible for maintaining centralized control measures even after lots are sold, until a notice of termination could be submitted. A lot operator would be responsible for maintaining lot controls. Each site has construction inspection requirements. The site must be inspected by the permittee, including lot permittees, once every 7 days and within 24 hours of a rainfall event, a ½ inch or greater. The areas that we would expect to see as part of the construction inspection would be perimeter, where the sediment may leave the site, BMP locations, construction traffic accesses, material and waste storage areas, and near streams, wetlands, or lakes located on the site. Once the project is complete, a notice of termination can be submitted. In the case for a developer, the site has achieved final stabilization for areas that the permittee is responsible, and all requirements for post-construction have been met. For a lot operator, the lot must have achieved final stabilization, or the home builder establishing temporary stabilization, including perimeter controls for an individual lot prior to the homeowners occupying and relaying the need for and benefits of final stabilization. In order to qualify to submit the notice of termination, there needs to be final stabilization. So what is it? Final stabilization means construction activities in the SWP are complete, vegetative cover is at least 70% growth density, all temporary sediment and erosion controls are removed, post-construction BMPs, if applicable, are installed. Thank you for your time, and my contact information is listed under the Southwest District Office.
Alrighty. Thanks, Michelle, for putting that together. I don't think I've seen any chats come through on the chat box. If anybody has any questions, feel free to submit them there. If not, Michelle, if you have anything else you'd like to add, or we can move on to our next speaker. Oh, So our next speaker is, we've got Jonathan Walters. He's with Earthworks Environmental. Jonathan Walters is a SWE of Earthworks Environmental, an environmental compliance consulting firm. He assists developers and construction managers to ensure NPDES compliance for clients across the country. He earned his associate's degree in environmental science from the Ohio State University, ATI, in 2016, and a bachelor's degree in environmental science with a focus in soil and water science from the Ohio State University in 2018. He has over 5 years of experience in the construction environmental compliance field and 3 years of experience with a focus on construction and NPDES compliance for clients in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana region at Earthworks Environmental. So Jonathan, if you want to go ahead and share your screen. And
all right. Hello, everyone. I'll go ahead and share my screen real quick here. And then we'll dive right in. Let's present from the beginning here. All right, like Beth said, I'm Jonathan Walters from Earthworks Environmental. I'll be presenting mostly on NPDES lot controls, and then just kind of quickly going over how to file an individual lot NOIs. I know Michelle went over it, but I do have experience doing it. So if you guys have any questions in regards to the application process, how to use the eBiz system, anything like that, feel free to just shoot a question and or reach out to me individually. So onward, like Michelle said, you're applying for coverage underneath the NPDES permit system. And the main thing is you are, I guess, applying for coverage of discharging your stormwater. With that being said, your stormwater is the only thing that can be discharged. These pollutants that are usually picked up in the on your site and then discharged off-site are actually what that permit controls. So that they've put together some, I guess, processes in order for you to comply with that permit and discharge only stormwater, not discharging unallowed discharges such as trash, sediment, hydrocarbons, concrete washout, or any other contaminants used in that building process. So you're applying for a notice of intent, and that is just to say that you want coverage underneath the construction general permit. Here in Ohio, we're under 5th generation of that permit, and that expires in 4/22/23. So you got some time before we move on to the next permit. So you're stuck with this one, and that's what we deal with right now. So discharging that stormwater from your site, the main focus, like Michelle said, is in the sediment. So the federal EPA actually has put together a list of the most common pollutants and sediments on the top of that list. So the graphic here off to the right hand side is a graphic that was created by the US EPA just to show the rates of erosion on land-based activities. You'll see that bare soil, and an example of that is an unmanaged construction site, produces a much higher rate of erosion than any of the other activities. And that's kind of why we're specifically looking at, there's a lot of disturbance that has to do with when you're building, and we want to make sure that none of that kind of contributes to the pollution issues in our streams and rivers. So just in general about a stormwater plan, Michelle went over timing and everything like that, but just a general rundown on what is expected of creating a plan, how to implement that plan, and then all of the final things you'll have to do in order to terminate your coverage from that permit. So first, you must make a plan. You must either know what your construction activity is going to be and how you can implement BMPs in order to comply with that permit. Once you made that plan, as Michelle said, you will then file for a lot NOI. For lot NOIs, you want to do that 7 days prior to your activity. So with that being said, a lot of times that has to do with turnover from the developer to the home builder. So 7 days prior to that turnover is what you're required to do. Then once you have your plan, you've filed for the lot NOI, you've received your coverage letter from the OEPA, then you can implement that plan. That's where I see a lot of issues coming up with home builders, is the implementation of that plan. A lot of the stuff, I guess, is looked at as, I've already taken care of the paperwork portion. But then getting your plan actually implemented on site is the most important part, because all of this planning means nothing without you actually doing it. So installing lot controls prior to land disturbing activity, like I said, a lot of times when you're transferring over from a home builder, those lots will either be temporarily stabilized and or have controls on them, and then you have to take that, assume that responsibility. As Michelle said, inspection and maintenance of all those BMPs is required in order to comply. You must inspect those BMPs in your site every 7 days and after a half-inch rain event within a 24-hour period on the following day. That in the state of Ohio, the following day is a business day. So that excludes federal holidays and weekends. Main thing when you're doing those inspections, like she said, you want to take a look at your perimeter controls, all of your BMPs, make sure that you're functioning properly and your plan is actually put in place. Anytime that you have trouble with that plan or have discharges when you've implemented that plan, anything that you might need to change your plan, those amendments can be made. You just have to document them, let the managers know, usually let the regulators know that you've made that amendment in your plans. So that way they know you're making some effort to continually apply, to continually comply. Once you get done with your work in regards to what is in your SWP, typically for this situation, you're home building on a single lot. So once you've got your home built and your lot then is ready for your final grade and stabilization, you do that final grade, you stabilize the remaining areas, anywhere that's covered in concrete, mulch, any of these other land covers other than vegetation are acceptable as long as you have ground coverage. But that remaining area that doesn't have ground coverage, typically your yard, your backyard, areas like that, will need to be stabilized, meeting that final stabilization requirement of 70% coverage. At that point, you can remove all of your BMPs and file your NOT. Filing that NOT relieves you of coverage underneath that permit. So you want to make sure that all of those, items are corrected prior to filing that NOT, because then you are no longer covered to discharge stormwater from that site. You'll have to acquire another permit. So BMPs, tools, and lot controls. These controls are pretty much the same as what they're used on a large development, any type of construction activity, but they're just modified down to a single lot construction. One of the biggest issues I hear from people is their lack of space on those lots. Nowadays, we build quarter-acre lots, and it becomes very, very constrained once that structure is up on what all activities you can actually implement. With that, that's where kind of phasing and sequencing of that construction activity comes in. Want to make sure we have controls in place. If we're going to run into a situation where we don't have space or we have, other work going on in an area, we want to make sure those controls are in place prior to that activity, so that way we don't run into that issue. So the CGP lays out just a standard controls for post-construction and also temporary BMPs for you to meet those requirements of the permit. And then your plan kind of goes over how you personally are going to implement those controls to meet that requirement. I will always go back to the big picture, make sure everyone knows and understands why and what we're doing here. The big picture is your uncontaminated stormwater, when it falls from the sky, is uncontaminated. As soon as it hits your land, exposed soil, whatever the situation is, you're then going to see it pick up pollutants, and your goal is to not let those pollutants leave your site. That stormwater will almost inevitably have to leave your site unless you do have infiltration basins, but majority areas around Ohio have some pretty clayey soils. So you're gonna end up most situations having to discharge stormwater off-site. But with that being said, you want to make sure you have controls in place to keep those pollutants from leaving your site and getting into a violation issue. Just to go over this little graphic I have over here, it's just a general, here's kind of the 4 or 5 things that you're going to see on a single lot home building situation that could lead to offsite discharges and also NPDES compliance issues. So sediment track outs, your main thing that I see from developers, home builders. You got a lot of trades working on a certain lot. Having a good stabilized construction entrance or lot access pad, whichever way you want to see it, they're pretty much the same thing. One's just modified for the smaller lot access. You just want to make sure that you have large rock, whatever your plan entails to prevent sediment track out from vehicles leaving, I guess going back and forth from pavement to exposed soil. And then sheet flow offsite. So typically when we're talking about just a lot, you're going to have positive flow away from the foundation, at least at final grade. So most situations, you're going to have at least sheet flow leaving your lot either on all sides or just a few sides, and implementing lot controls to prevent that water from just leaving your site and onto another person's property out of your permitted area. Lot perimeter containment is your main thing that's used. A lot of times that's silt fence, sometimes that's used as wattles. There's a lot of different options for you to use, but some type of lot control just to prevent water and sediment and other contaminants from leaving your site and washing onto other people's sites. So discharge of sediment to the infrastructure is another thing. A lot of times when a pre-development plan is put together, they've got all of your infrastructure already installed, and you're just working on this one specific lot. The main thing is all of your water either goes off-site or it goes to an inlet into these central basins that the developer has created. With that being said, if you have just an individual lot and your permitted area is just that lot, you have to prevent sediment from leaving your site. So your site functionally is just that lot. And if you let sediment go into the infrastructure, into the developer's main area, you've actually letting it leave your lot is the issue. So containing it with inlet protection, preventing sediment from making its way into those infrastructure, and just letting a little bit of stormwater go into the infrastructure is actually what you're looking to do. On to the next page. So implementation and installation. Just like building plans, there's certain specifications on stormwater plans. Mainly the point of this is so that way you have an understanding of how to install them, and also so that way you have an agreement with regulatory agencies and also in the legal sense that you implemented a plan to prevent stormwater from being contaminated. Typically, these BMPs are outlined in a sediment erosion control plan for the larger development. When you're working with just an individual lot, a lot of times I suggest to my clients to use that sediment, whatever the controls are on that approved sediment erosion control plan that was implemented for the larger development, into your actual home building lots. So if you call for a certain type of inlet protection or a certain type of size or length of construction entrance, you always want to try to go by that plan as much as you can. Typically that's approved by the municipality. In the situation of Warren County, it'll be approved by the county, and also some municipalities it'll be approved by the city or whatever that municipality that's in charge of that MS4. So there's BMP specifications, like I said, they're to help you understand the requirements and how to install, inspect, maintain these BMPs. Like I said, that's kind of an agreement between you and the MS4 regulatory agency on how you're going to implement these controls, what controls are going to be implemented, and then ensuring that you maintain those controls, which is what people run into the most. As I said, once you put a BMP on site, it then has to be inspected and maintained whenever you reach that, I guess, maintenance threshold, I'll say. So these are just general BMP specs from the Ohio Rainwater and Land Development Guide. That's just the general guide. I'll pop to the next slide here. So this is just the general guide for BMPs that are accepted here in Ohio. The Department of Natural Resources puts out. The main thing that you guys will want to look at for just specific lots is they have a section or chapter 8, which is completely focused on small construction site controls. This is just a general overview of what could possibly come up on a certain lot. By no means are all of these going to apply to you. A lot of situations we do not have a protected area in a stream at the rear of a lot. So we'll only need the controls that are, I guess, the site conditions require. But it's just a general overview of how to do it. There's a lot of manufactured BMPs that can be also used and approved through your municipality. But the Ohio, just a good kind of rule of thumb to use is if it's in the rainwater and land development guide, it will be accepted by almost anyone in the state of Ohio. So that's usually kind of rule of thumb I try to use, is let them know, hey, here's your base of what you have. If on those plans, or if on the sediment erosion control plans for the development, there's another manufactured BMP that the engineer suggested, feel free to use that, and you just have to document everything in your plans. So on to the next slide, talking about BMP installation and maintenance. This is where my expertise kind of comes in mostly. So if you guys have any questions about it, anything like that, I have seen most BMPs used in Ohio. And if not, I am open to learning more, so that way I can better perform my job. But all controls are required to be inspected, like I said, in order to continue to comply. Your main thing is each time it rains, you're going to have sediment buildup in front of those controls. That is the point of those controls, is in order to keep that sediment from leaving the site and just let stormwater kind of slowly leave the site. They're inspected every 7 days and after a half-inch rain until your site's at final stabilization. The main purpose here of these inspections is, first off, to catch issues when they come up, but more importantly, to document what all you're doing, documenting the inspection findings, what maintenance was done, what new installs were done at that certain time because of site conditions changing. And then anytime that you actually have to make a change to that plan that you have, one thing our company kind of put forward for all of us is just the rule of thumb of identifying the 4 W's of that plan change: the who made that change, the where that change was made, the what and how it was implemented. So if there's a need for a plan change, for instance, a certain control is no longer functioning, silt fence keeps getting overran in this certain area, or whatever the situation is, when you make that plan change, you want to make sure you document everything. And something that also may be beneficial is contacting your municipality, letting them know that you made that change, so that way when they come out to do an inspection, they're aware of it. So with inspection forms, as Michelle showed in the last presentation, you can use the Ohio General SWP inspection form. Kind of just outlines the perimeter BMPs. There's some municipalities that will have you use their inspection form. And then third-party consultants will also sometimes have their own derived to comply with the state CGP. So when it comes to issues, or I guess things that are identified in those inspections that need to be corrected, you'll have 3 days for maintenance items, 10 days for new installs or inadequate controls, and then 10 days for structural BMPs. The main rule of thumb I try to tell the guys that I deal with is, if you can meet that 3-day requirement on all of them, you're going to make everybody happy. But there's some situations where you can't. Just letting people know, documenting that, you can't perform this because the pond is whatever the situation is. You can't always get work done in 3 days on structural BMPs. Sometimes you have to communicate with an engineer and then implement the plan that engineer came up with. So when it comes to doing inspections, the federal EPA requires you to have your inspections done by qualified personnel. this just is general knowledge of erosion sediment control. These can be done in-house. They do not have to be done by a third party. But in-house, when you're doing those, you want to just make sure that person who's going out and doing your inspections knows what the principles and practices of erosion control are, has the ability to assess the construction site and its impact to stormwater quality. The main purpose of that is so that way when the plan is not working, that qualified person knows when to raise the flag saying that, hey, this plan we've implemented is no longer working. We're still having discharge issues, not complying with the permit. We're going to need to make some changes to that plan in order to comply. And then just the capacity to effectively assess those stormwater controls, just making sure that they are implemented according to the plan, meet the requirements of that specific BMP, and make sure that everything kind of on site is compliant in regards to the way they're installed, the way they're maintained, the way they're inspected. The whole deal is just you're making sure that it's all compliant. On to the next one. So this slide was mostly covered by Michelle. This is directly pulled from the CGP, the wording on what the responsibilities of each developer is when it comes down to sublots, and then how that responsibility is transferred and or not transferred to the lot ownership. As we said, filing that individual lot NOI is assuming that new lot owner's responsibility to complying with the CGP, and that's pretty much the only way the developer gets out of being responsible for it. Otherwise, they kind of are held responsible. So just to quickly run through the filing of individual lot NOIs on the EBIS system. I know Michelle kind of ran through this quickly. And as I said, I have experience in this. If you guys ever have any questions on how to use it, anything like that, feel free to reach out. And then, so applying on this online system, they have a system called Streams, which is the Surface Water Tracking, Reporting, and Electronic Application Management System. And then there is a way for you to apply without using that, but you'll have to contact the Ohio EPA and document a demonstrated hardship that leads you to not be able to use that online system in order to submit your NOIs. That system also is just a general EPA thing. You can submit other permits other than just these stormwater ones. But the main thing is once you submit, a lot of these people are going to be doing multiple lots. Once you submit one lot NOI, it saves your information, makes your life a lot easier. Also, when it comes to consulting services, if you have a consulting service to do it, they can do the application portion and then delegate that over to you through that EBIS system for you to sign it and also pay for the permit fees. These two links at the bottom are the guides, the Streams guide and also the EPA guide. Very useful documents from the EPA. I probably wouldn't know anything about this without these documents. So if you ever have any questions about it, anything like that, their technical assistance is awesome, but also these documents pretty much lay it right out for you. So actually filing the NOI, actually, hold on, we're not quite there yet. So I kind of ran through this in this slide already, but the lot NOIs can be filed. You can find the NOIs of that development if it is still open through the Ohio EPA website. And you want to just make sure that you submit that file prior, 7 days prior on lots. And if it's a general development, you want to be 21 days prior. So the Streams, the Stream system itself, here's just a quote from the Ohio EPA that I back entirely. I've used the system a lot in the last 3.5 years, I think it is. It's a pretty in-depth system, but when you get moving through it, it becomes quite self-explanatory. And as I said, those guides on that previous slides, I guess the links to them are very helpful for you to get through this process. Like I said, the first few times might be a little difficult. Once you're through it, as we know with all technology, it kind of comes around. So actually filing the NOI. So I'll run through this kind of quickly. There's just a few steps to it. The main thing is having all of the information needed for you to submit the application. And they actually have a guide that you'll see on my last slide about, I guess, the process and what's required of filing for a lot NOI. Main thing is, like I said, having all that information ready for when you go to apply. The computer system and applying is not the difficult part. It's making sure you have all that information. So you'll go to the epa.ohio.gov website. You'll create an account and a login, or you'll log in if you already have one. This then you'll create a PIN that is your electronic signature for this site. So then once you're on the eBiz site, there's a bunch of options. Like I said, that site's used for all of the applications, a lot of permitting that have nothing to do with surface water not surface water. It has nothing to do with NPDES lot construction. So you'll want to make sure you go to the surface water NPDES application section. You'll then be led right to the application. You'll fill that application out and provide the submittal fees. And then once you've submitted everything, the EPA will then send you an acknowledgement letter letting you know whether, issues had come up, or if you get the acknowledgement letter, then that means you're covered underneath the stormwater permit. So then really your main thing on the second column is just the price of things. So all construction stormwater NOIs fees are $200 plus the $20 per whole acre disturbance. For these lots typically are less than an acre, so you're going to be at that 200 range. But anything further than that, you're going to have the all the way up to the possibility of the maximum for a larger development at 500. So here's just a list of references. You'll be able to see these in my presentation. That was my main purpose. If you guys need direction to how to create a stormwater plan, EPA rainwater guide, the eBiz system, and then the 2 documents down here at the bottom in regards to filing those lot NOIs. And I believe that's all I've got for you. If there's any questions, let me know.
I don't see any questions in the chat. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in there and we'll address them at the end. Thank you again, Jonathan, for that presentation. Next up, we have Greg Smith with OEPA Companies. He is a developer there, and we've worked with him at a site here in Warren County, and I kind of asked for him to come and speak about some of his experiences and kind of developing that SWP responsibilities and relationships with his home builders. Greg, do you want me to read this long bio, or
no? That's okay. That's enough for this.
Okay.
I do need a favor from Jonathan, though. I can't share my screen until you quit sharing yours. So hold on a minute. All right, can everybody see my screen now?
Good to
Excellent.
go.
And I hope everybody can hear me. So hold on a minute. Just everything rearranged on my monitors when I did that. Sharing. All right, good. So the OEPA companies, we've been around forever, pretty much 1949. We've done a lot of our own construction, but we also do a lot of custom home communities. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our custom home development in particular, because I think it's really unique on the way we have to deal with the NOI and the transferring of the NOI to the home builder. Our Warren County community is called Country Creek Estates. It's basically located in a little village of Red Lion on 741 and 122, where it intersects with 123 there. We've been working in there for about 4 or 5 years now. Started out, that site's got some very unique characteristics that make it a challenge for erosion control. Most notably, it was not called Country Creek by mistake. There is a very large creek that runs pretty much right through the center of that site. In addition to that large creek, there are several smaller tributaries, which are also unfortunately waters of the U.S., which feed into that creek. And then there were 6 wetlands located on site. Most of them very small, but enough that also created things that needed to be monitored and watched during the construction process. It was necessary for us to cross the creek in a couple of different locations when building Country Creek. So we had to seek a permit from the U.S. Corps of Engineers. That permit process took several months, actually over a year, and came with it a large number of restrictions in and above the typical notice of intent restrictions for stormwater, most notably some buffers along the creek and a very limited amount of impact. We couldn't impact more than what we had been permitted to do so. And that really kind of included impact that might be happening by the builders on the sites. So we needed to be sure we were communicating accurately to our home builders and what they were and were not allowed to do. We kind of failed with that with Section 1, and that's kind of one of the things I think wanted to show a little bit how we went from a failure to an improvement. We started construction in 2017 and built into an extremely wet spring in 2018. And just that spring, it seemed to rain every day. So I was out in site daily doing the 0.5 inch rain things. We were behind schedule as a developer, and many of the lots have been sold even before development started. So many of the custom home developers or builders were already on their lots, also creating disturbance and working on their new homes, which are all very large and had lots of disturbance. Most notably, what was happening to us is we had implemented all our erosion controls before we started, but our builders, for the most part, weren't. There were very few homes that were protected with our perimeter erosion controls, and quite honestly, that erosion was making its way down into our ditches and towards our ponds and creating problems for the developers' controls overall, which were failing largely because of the amount of rain. To make things worse, I had very little ability to go back to those home builders and enforce them to do anything because they had bought the lot at that point in time. They didn't work for me. They worked for the lot owner, who didn't owe me anything because they didn't have anything, obligating them to do anything in my contract between them. So it really made it very difficult as a developer for us to force compliance from our home builders. So after Section 1 and going into Sections 2 and 3, we did some pretty aggressive moves to fix that. Most notably, these moves were legal contract maneuvers that got put into the lot purchase agreements. Every lot purchase agreement got a very large addendum. The addendum did a number of things. First is probably the most important. Added a deposit in which the home buyer, or the lot buyer in our case, was required to leave money into our accounts, essentially the over accounts, for erosion control and other damages that might happen to our public infrastructure during the construction of their house. Post completion of the construction of that house, I do an inspection of that lot, and then most of the time we'll just release that deposit. But it does give me some teeth during the construction to, require the builders to do what they are required under the NOIs and under the erosion control permits, because if they don't, I will spend their money and do it ourselves. So that construction deposit is very valuable. It also helps for, I'm glad that Jonathan mentioned the importance of tracking onto the roads. That's an issue we have. It's a custom home community there. I am not cleaning the roads on a weekly basis as I may in some of our builder where I develop and build. So each home builder is required to clean up their own sediment tract off their own building site. And having that deposit ensures that gets done. Also, what we have been required to do is make sure that, I'm glad Jonathan went over the individual NOI permittee process, because That is also something that was not being enforced with Section 1 that is strictly being enforced now in Sections 2 and 3 as we go forth here in Country Creek. And any development over it does again will certainly be something we enforce. What we did was that clause requiring that transfer has been added to our contract. So any home buyer or lot buyer who does not transfer the NOI is in violation of their contract with me. We specifically require the perimeter controls. That's something that Warren County's been requiring of us, and we pass that requirement on to the home builder for their lots, individual lots. We will not approve an individual builder's home plans until I see a copy of that transferred NOI permit. So that is required to be submitted to our inspecting architect who reviews all of the home plans for compliance with all the other regulations, architectural requirements. They must also have a copy of the transferred NOI as part of that approval. So theoretically, then no construction can start until that permit has been transferred, which quite honestly protects me and you know, kind of enables us to tell Warren County and other organizations that may see a violation on an individual lot that is that individual lot owner's responsibility, and they need to fix it. Other things that we kind of pointed out in that addendum are some of the restrictions that were placed on us by the U.S. Corps of Engineers, including easements that may be on each of the lots. Most notably, the easements to the creeks are big deals in our development. The U.S. Corps has even stronger easements in some of those areas just to protect the creeks, the waters of the U.S. areas. Warren County has a setback easement from those creeks. A lot of times those two easements overlap, by the way. We do have some no-cut zones, and some of the lots have wetlands on them. So what we do now is after my real estate agent sells a lot, or thinks they've sold a lot, I will prepare an individual addendum with the specific details of each of those items that impact that particular lot. It does take some time on my hands to do, but it's worth the effort. And then I will meet with that home buyer, lot buyer, and review that addendum with them. Hopefully they bring their builder along, but most cases they haven't picked their builder out yet, so that doesn't always happen. And they have to acknowledge each one of those conditions and existence on that lot. And then hopefully once a builder has been identified, they are sharing that addendum with that builder so they can actually implement the things that they're required to do. Just a couple examples of some of the perimeter controls that are happening. Erosion control fence is the most common one. It works very well. I like it just because it is very obvious to the county inspectors when they drive by that it has been implemented, it's in place, and quite honestly, when it fails, that's pretty obvious too. You can see a little bit of failure on the one here to the far left where there's erosion control fence has bent down a little bit. Something else that's pretty common and works pretty well, in some cases better than erosion control fence, is a mulch. You know, we had a wooded site, so there was a lot of mulch created with our construction and with each of these homes construction. So that actually works pretty well for using along the perimeter of a site to avoid the sediment from falling into the creeks. And like I showed earlier, our creeks, you know, most of the lots, or many of the lots anyway, do have a creek or two creeks in some cases that go through them. So protecting the home's construction from entering the creek was in this case even more important than during my original infrastructure construction, because my original infrastructure construction really didn't impact that much land, just the right of way of the roads. But the homes themselves, they made the most impact. And so they created a whole lot more conditions which needed the erosion control sediment features than what the original street infrastructure did. And then we have a lot of individual smaller features to deal with our stormwater. Country Creek being a large lot subdivision served by swales, not necessarily storm sewer, really didn't have enough stormwater created to force stormwater retention for stormwater's sake. That being said, we did need to do water quality features. And, you know, water quality was going to be needed throughout the development. And that was one of the biggest challenges in this whole development because of the way the lots sloped towards the creeks, didn't always hit to the ditches. You know, swales weren't always available. I'm a big fan of storm sewers after doing Country Creek. So these are just some of the smaller water quality ponds that we implemented. That is another thing that gets put into our addendum. Some of these ponds do exist on private property. So if you acquired a lot which had a water quality pond on it, that addendum explains what your responsibility is and what the homeowners association responsibility is for that pond going forward. Traditionally, we expect the owners, the lot owner, to mow them. And if there's any failure in the structure themselves or the operation of the pond, the HOA will repair and fix that. So that's traditionally how we've passed on the responsibility of that particular feature. So I like to think that, you know, right now we have done a much better job of maintaining in compliance with our current section of development than what we did in section 1. I do believe, as last time I was out there, all the home builders that are under construction right now do have their preliminary controls in place. And one thing that we've done to help implement that is to keep an active list of which builders are building where. And that way, you know, when one of my inspections or one of the county inspections notice that a preliminary control or a violation is occurring, usually I get a phone call, and then I can call that builder and let them know, you know, immediately, hey, look, you guys got a problem you need to fix. And again, if they don't fix it, I can then use the escrow deposit money to fix it for them. And my contract gives me the right to enter onto their site and do that, which again is something that I did not have in section 1, which made fixing things in section 1 quite an issue. Another little detail that we did here in Country Creek, which I recommend highly, if you do have wetlands on your site, orange construction fencing is a very inexpensive method to implement before you sell a lot even. And that has you know, erased any gray area of what may be a protected wetland and what is not a protected wetland once I transfer a lot between me and the home builder. We had one instance in section 1 where I transferred a lot that had a wetland on it. The builder drove through it with a bobcat, and I was held responsible for it. I still don't think it was the right thing to do, but we end up having to cover the mitigation of that wetland in one of our permits. So going forward, I am very careful to make more than obvious, hey, look, there's a wetland here. It is protected. It is not something that I have permitted to have impacted, so it needs to remain unimpacted. We did the same with the creek crossings. We did have some permitted creek crossings, but obviously that was a limited area. So we implemented orange fencing on each side of that area so that the utility companies and other contractors who were working in that permitted area knew that they couldn't just, you know, go further into the creek than what the permit covered, and unintentionally, you know, put me in violation of my permit. So that was something we did. And orange fencing, like I said, is well worth the cost of that to get that done. And finally, grass. Grass is the biggest challenge here in Ohio, largely because it doesn't grow year round. So, you know, the 7 days after completion, getting it down some temporary erosion control measures, getting in grass seed is something we've worked very hard on. Been having a number of ways to do it. You know, we finished section 3 last year after Thanksgiving, so putting grass seed down wouldn't work, but we did get the straw down right away. and we are going back and seeding those areas this spring, and they already are strawed. And so the erosion control measures put in within 7 days. We're putting additional seed in. Been very big fan of hydro seed. It's an easy way to get a large area covered in a quick period of time. Also have found, and I'm going to have to reseed several times during the course of our process. You know, we seeded the ditches and swales upon our completion of them, and then we're usually seeding again upon the completion of utility installation, because they seem to tear them all up again. And then usually the home builder is seeding a third time upon the completion of their construction. So with one of these custom home developments, it just makes sense to go ahead and put into your budget to assume that you're going to end up seeding a site, or especially these swales and ditches, several times before you're done with the project. And it is important to those inspecting us that that is done timely. So yeah, I'm not going to come here and say that we've done everything right in Country Creek by any means, but I just wanted to share some of the experiences we've learned through failure, actually, and how we fix those, most notably through changes to our contract and through communications with our home building community and home builders that are implementing our sites on, hey, look, you know, not only are we requiring this, but so is Warren County. And if you don't do it, you're going to be in trouble with both the developer and Warren County. So, you know, communicating that early on, especially with the sale of the lot, you know, that at that point, you know, really does help and has helped. And quite honestly, even when I make a phone call, I don't get people arguing with me anymore like we did in section 1, because they were explained to clearly that was going to be required of them. So if they don't do it and I call them up, they understand that it is required of them, and it's been happening more quickly afterwards. So happy to answer any questions. I think it's 1 o'clock, and that's really all I had to share.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg, so much for that presentation. We have one question in the chat box. It might be a little bit of an Ohio EPA question, and maybe Jonathan, you can pipe in a bit. So we have someone who has builders who are having a hard time filling out like the lot applications. He's asking if there's a third-party company that can help with them with that. The biggest challenge that they're facing is you have to reference the permit number or the NOI of the development. And some of the lots are in sections that are no longer active for them as a developer. So Jonathan or Michelle, you guys have an answer? I think I have an answer too. We can maybe.
I'll let Michelle go first, and then I'll talk about consulting services.
I would say just give me a call, and then we can check to see whether or not the permit was revoked. Because we did revoke quite a few of them in 2018.
Yeah, so how we kind of go about it is, like I said in my presentation, there's a lookup on the Ohio EPA website for you to look up active permits. If there isn't an active permit, you're probably best to go to Michelle, see about that, whether it was terminated or not. But in regards to like the filing of the lot NOIs, like I said, we do that as a consulting service, just to file those NOIs. We do that on the eBiz system, and then we can implement, we can send that over, delegate it to the lot, I guess, purchaser, for them to sign and then submit application fees. So we still use the stream system in order to do that, but you could send all that information to a consulting service like ours that would put that information into the system, make sure that you have all the required information, and then we delegate that over to you for you to sign it. In regards to how easy that is, I have a guy who can't even log into a computer that can do it now, just simply because I've showed him twice, and all you have to do is all the information's there. All you do is just log on to that system, create yourself a PIN, and then I guess accept the fact that you are applying for that permit. That's one of the only things that we can't do for you. And the EPA actually kind of makes it easy for us to delegate that over.
So it goes on the bottom of the drone like this. So what you do is you just
One of the things too we've noticed over the years is most civil engineers have gotten pretty good at it as well. So if you're having a civil engineer help you with your home design, which quite honestly, any decent sized house has a civil engineer involved in the process, that civil engineer usually can help through that individual lot NOI preparation process. And I agree with Jonathan. The only thing that they can't do is hit the submit button and maybe make the payment. But the Ohio EPA's delegation feature is fabulous. I prepare very few permits. My civil engineers prepare them for me and delegate it over to me. I do a quick flip through. If it looks like what I think I agreed to do, I'll go ahead and make the payment and hit the delegate submit, and it is very easy once that professional has prepared it. So, you know, a professional such as Jonathan's company or your civil engineer, using them to prepare your individual lot NOI, again, it's only a couple $100 and probably worth the effort to make sure you're covered correctly.
I agree with that completely. The engineers are very useful. They actually have usually the stormwater plan right there. So then they can acknowledge that it's there and everything. So.
Yeah, and if they're having issues, like Michelle said, with finding you as the developer's NOI, your NOI may have expired or been revoked. So you just have to look into reapplying for coverage. You do have to keep, as a developer, an active open NOI until the site's complete, and that does include home building as well. So when these lots are coming in, it's not they're only responsible for the controls on their single lot. You as the developer are still responsible for all your central controls in the process is that, and you still have to keep that open NOI for that phase until all the homes are built out for the most part and stabilized in vegetation. And I think that's how I interpret the permit. Michelle or anyone else, if they want to correct me. But do we have any other questions or comments? Feel free to put them in the chat box or contact people directly. Anybody have any closing remarks? Or it is 1:05, we're about 5 minutes over. Try to keep it to an hour. Again, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. I will probably send the recorded session as well as some of the presentations and contact info out to everyone who registered. So thanks again for coming, and happy Earth Day, everyone. Do your part. Try to do something good for our natural resources today and every day if you can. So thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.